All right, welcome to the Sell by Being Human podcast. I'm your host, Alex Smith, the podcast where we learn from people in all walks of life who sell things through the lens of human connection. We can learn human skills from people all around us. This is the place where I will bring the very best of those people together. You know, this is a real, kind of important moment in the podcast journey. I was just joking with this guest. She was my first guest on the first podcast I launched called Stories of Selling Human. It's the same basic theme, but this is the first episode of the new title, and it's just closer to kind of the theme and the essence of why I started the podcast. Really this person reached out to me cold on LinkedIn more than 3 years ago, I think. And it's crazy that we've known each other that long, and we just met in person for the first time after 3 years, 2 weeks ago, in Austin, Texas at the Sales Success Summit. But this person has had a long history in recruiting and talent development. She is currently the Vice President of Recruiting and Talent Strategy at the Sales Collective, and she's been a recruiter for so many great organizations, and also in the realm of helping great salespeople find their next great opportunity. I am so honored and blessed to have yet again Tabitha Kavanaugh to the podcast. Welcome, Tab. How are you?
Alex, that was quite the introduction. I love it. Now, this is, like you said, a full circle moment that just feels so good. When you said that, I got chills, because you never know when you cross paths with someone where that's going to go. Is it going to just be one tiny moment in time? Is it going to be for a longer season? And so the fact that I've gotten to keep you in my life and then meet you in real life just recently is super, super cool. And so I feel so honored to be here and just have this discussion, and hopefully the right people will hear it at the right time, and they can walk away with something special because of it. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. I feel like it is like, I'm not super spiritual, but like people come into your orbit for different reasons, a season, a lifetime. I think for you, I was just re-listening to our episode, like you only found me because I made a decision to take someone up on an offer to sell them on LinkedIn Live, where people could join in and you could pitch that sales trainer live. And it was really scary for me to do. I did it. Nothing came out of it with that sales trainer necessarily. We know each other, but more so, probably the most important thing probably that came of it was you reaching out and saying that you saw me, and then becoming the first guest on the podcast, and kind of a relationship afterwards. So I love the line in your LinkedIn profile. It says, I believe in building meaningful relationships. They make the world go round. I couldn't agree more. So thanks so much, Tab, for joining this again today. I think people can learn so much from you and your approach to recruiting, and like I said in the beginning, I think people all around us, look, we're all in sales, and I'm really interested about people that maybe don't consider as that title of salesperson, but they're doing things to create change, and they're building meaningful connections, like you say in your LinkedIn profile, and adding this human element to kind of what they do. So we'll really learn a lot about that today. Before I do, though, I have to ask you this question. We're going to ask everyone this question. So if you're listening to this, you've probably heard me ask it on the prior podcast name, but we're going to kind of dig into it a little bit more on this podcast. And it's just the question off of the title. Tab, when I say the term sell by being human, what does that mean to you when you hear it?
I love that question, because I think that being human is comprised of so many things. We are gifted different things in this life, different talents and different ways of being. And we're also a collection of all of the different experiences we've had, all the people that we've crossed paths with. So who I am today as a human is very much influenced by 38 years of being on this planet. And so I think sell by being human is just that. It's taking all of those things and using your own voice and the collection of all of the different experiences and people that have crossed paths with you, and do that, right? Because I remember when I first got into recruitment, my leader at the time, he was a Southern gentleman. He was so well spoken. Everything that came out of his mouth in my brain was like perfect, right? I was like, man, how does he even speak like this? Like, I don't understand. And I remember when I would try to sound like him, to the point where I was using words that he would use that would never normally come out of my mouth, like folks, which I can't even say that word, like folks, folks. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, that's a cool word and all, but that's not me. And so I found that the more that I leaned into my own voice and figuring out my approach, that was what made me so special in the recruitment realm. And that was cool because you have all these people around you telling you that be more of this, be less of that, like you're too much or you're too little. And I just found that when I showed up as me, I was both attracting and repelling the right people at the same time. And that was super cool.
Yeah, I like that last thing. You like repelling the people that are wrong and that like really don't need to be in your orbit, or people that are kind of like criticizing just to criticize and to like poke needles at you. And I think it's so important. Like, I think people are like, okay, yeah, build relationships. I get that. But how is that different than being human? What you just said is like, we all have these unique things. That's what I'm so curious about. Like if you have these unique traits, that doesn't mean I have to copy them, but I can learn from them. Like how you access those things that are you, like that change that you made, like a girl from the north, like needing to say y'all or folks or like, I don't know what else you were trying to say from him, but like, I think maybe like, yeah, it's probably interesting to me to where you kind of made that change, and maybe some of the questions you were asking yourself, and some like if you did that yourself or if you worked with other people. So yeah, before I get into like what's changed since again, like 3 years since we've last talked to each other, I'm sure so much has happened in your career. You've had a couple jobs since then. Yeah, maybe touch on that, like when you say that, really knowing like who you are and leaning into that and attracting the right people, repelling the people that don't need to be in your orbit. Do you think that there's something that helped you kind of find that in yourself? And maybe you're probably still doing that. Really, it's never something that you totally learn and that's it. What are things that have helped you in that journey to kind of lean into more of what makes Tab you?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. God definitely is huge in my life. And so I found that the more that I leaned into my faith, the more I felt comfortable not being equipped as well. And so it was like a mix of all these things of, okay, I'm constantly trying to equip myself, but I'm also constantly not equipped enough. But the experiences I've been through just keep taking me to that next level. I know, like, I wake up every day and I just pray to meet the right person, the right people, like put the right person in my path that either needs to meet me today or that I need to meet today for some reason. And that's like what I say every single day, because connection is everything to me. And I've, like you said in my profile, I say it, meaningful connection makes the world go round, because it does. I think people need people. I know people need people. And so the more that I really honed in on just being myself, and to be honest, it has been such an evolution, and I'm not always comfortable, but I had to step outside of my comfort zone on a daily basis. I mean, when I first started in recruitment, I was recruiting in IT and gaming, which I'm laughing because I didn't know anything about those industries. I also didn't know anything about being a recruiter. I mean, I had the skills, but I had to translate those and then figure out, okay, how do I do this new thing? So all at once, things were happening. I just finished chemo for cancer. I came out of that and was like, oh my gosh, okay, what does life look like? What am I supposed to do now? And what I knew was that I was good at building relationships. And so I just kept leaning into that. So again, taking the talents that I know that I just innately have, I've leaned into being a better communicator, and not perfect, but I've really leaned into those things. So finding other people along the way too, people like you, people like Jack Wilson. I mean, I think of one thing that Jack said to me a few years ago, which was do Tab things. And that almost gave me the confidence and the permission of sorts as well to just continue to lean into who I am, because when we're you're you and I'm me. And when we are just who we are in our own little bubbles, sometimes it feels like what we are is not special, because we're so used to it. Like, so you almost take for granted those talents and those skills because you're like, oh, doesn't everyone know how to do this type of thing? And then you realize the more and more people that you meet, you're like, wow, okay, maybe I'm onto something. And I just realized it's okay. Like, some people are not going to like me along the way. And if that's the case, it's okay. I need to just keep doing what I feel is right and where I'm being called and where I'm feeling led to go. So that's kind of my approach.
When you say like do tab things, and it's such a great quote, like I think that's one thing that everybody can like ask themselves, like what are those things, like, and maybe if you ask your friends, like, hey, like to your closest friends, people in your family, like what are Alex things, what are tab things, like when you think of tab, like what are those things that like you make you think of me, or like you think I'm good at, like because I can't see it in myself, like I need help. Go out and do that, and I think a lot of people are maybe afraid to share those things on LinkedIn because just what you said is like the curse of knowledge. Like they think, oh, like this is just basic. This stuff is like common sense or common knowledge. If you're in business today and you're not doing these things and you're totally lost, but like, like you just never know. Like when you wake up, everyone out there doesn't have to wake up and pray to meet the right person or for the right person to meet them. I know that's your kind of thing, but they can say, hey, like who could benefit from where I'm at? There's always someone ahead in their career than you, and then always someone behind in their career than you. Like we never like reach some plateau where like someone can't learn from us or that we can't learn from someone else. So it's like there's no harm in kind of like just sharing those things. And if people are going like, okay, like seriously, what is Tab talking about recruiting, like this is like common knowledge, and be like, okay, great, like move on. Like I think it's so important to like repel those people that maybe aren't in your in your camp, and that's okay. It's totally fine. Like, as long as it's you're doing it for something that feels good to you or feels close to who you are, that's all that really matters, right? Like,
yeah, I think there's something and someone out there for everyone, right? And it's just a matter of whether or not we feel brave enough to put ourselves out there, and again, attract that into our orbit. A story that just came to mind that I wanted to share quickly was there's a gal a few years ago on LinkedIn who sang her resume. And I thought that was the coolest thing because no one was doing that. She played piano, she had a beautiful voice, and she's like, I'm looking for a job. How can I take the things that I'm good at, combine them to make this other output that will hopefully help me find a job? And it's exactly what she did. So her name is Paige. And Paige sang what she was good at, created a little jingle, put it out there, ended up on talk shows, ended up, I think, getting hired at Zoom, I want to say, and I'm pretty sure she's still there. I think of her all the time because of how cool that was. And you don't see that very often. So it's like, what are you good at that you can then in turn use to help you do the other thing that you're trying to do, whatever that is. Yeah, I love that story.
I'm glad you told it, because I think we all could like think of like what are things are we good at that we could use to help in that other thing that we want out of our careers, life, whatever. And I'm sure there are people that came on, oh, this isn't professional, this isn't, like no recruiter should look at this, or this will take too much time. And I'm sure there's critics out there, but like she obviously won in the end. So yeah, let's kind of transition to like what's happened the last few years. If you can think till like back to 2020, so it's May of 2020. What are some things that you've like learned along the way? I'm sure you have. Like, oh my gosh, every year, every new role. Has there anything been like a theme over the last couple years that you think like this kind of stage in your career that you learned kind of as a recruiter or maybe even as a job seeker?
Yeah, oh my gosh. It's so many things flooding my brain. I mean, recruitment in general just requires a certain level of resiliency, like sales, right? Recruitment is a version of that. And you're constantly, I have to reach out to people. I get rejected. I have to get up and try again. Sometimes you get to what you think is the finish line where an offer is coming and the position gets put on hold, and then you have to tell everyone, in your pipeline, like, hey, I'm so sorry that you just interviewed 5 times and now we can't continue to move forward. Or maybe an offer was supposed to be accepted and then that person just kind of didn't disclose all the information, and then all of a sudden they're not interested in the job for whatever reason. And so it's all those things of figuring out how to be curious enough, keep it conversational enough that people, you're constantly building that trust. And so, I mean, as you mentioned, let's see, when we last spoke, I think I was with Something New, so that was an agency. And from there, I wanted to get into healthcare recruitment. As a cancer survivor, I felt like that was just something I at least needed to try. I needed to get into the healthcare space, see if I could recruit people in that was going to make a difference in some type of innovative healthcare company. So I did that. I went and I got a contract somewhere for a little while that was supposed to turn full time, but as things happen in recruitment, as you know, positions, contracts end all the time. And so that's what happened with that opportunity. And so I went into another one. I actually went to work for a competitor to, again, just keep in that area. And then it didn't work out again. So I'm like, okay, this is cool. Not for me, but keep moving. And so recruiters are some of the first to go, no matter how well you're performing. It does not matter. If the company doesn't need to hire anymore, forget it, right? So it led me back to working with a former leader, the one I mentioned earlier that I started my recruitment career with, which was so cool. And then I made one of the hardest and arguably dumbest decisions of my career, but I don't regret it, to go over and be the head of talent at Fringe. And that's where I got to work with Jack Wilson and do all these cool things. But again, hiring went on a freeze. And so I switched actually over to sales for a little bit. And I was like a SDR, BDR there and doing some fun stuff. But it's just been crazy. It's been a ride. And now where I'm at is back in the sales realm, recruiting salespeople, sales leaders. And I'm so excited. I'm just excited to be back in recruitment. Took a short stint to do a contract for a global employer branding opportunity, which was insane. I mean, as you can hear, it's like all over the place. But, my career has been a zigzag. And I'm totally cool with that because I have just collected at every single place that I've went to. And so every new organization that gets to work with me at any given time, like I get to give all of that to them. And it's just a collection of really interesting experiences and more connections along the way, of course. So yeah. It's been crazy.
Yeah, it just makes me think, like, in this economy, like, while COVID's going on and even post-COVID, you're right, like organizations are kind of like, there's so much uncertainty out there. They want to hire, then they don't, like maybe funding stops and they're ramping up, now they're not, and like recruiting's going. So like people, I remember working for Monster, they'd be like, oh, we don't want the job hoppers, right? We don't want people that are, kind of going from one thing to another. Like they don't know if they're going to be loyal to us, but majority of the time, just what you said, I mean, a lot of it's either out of your control or, it's just like you think you're taking a good opportunity and then, things change and it has no fault of your own. You're just trying to navigate your career and going to, what you feel like is best at the time. But like what you just said, you're collecting so much along the way. And so, like, I think that stigma needs to totally end. And, I'm glad to see, like, some of the stuff that you put out on LinkedIn and some of the things you're mentioning here, about doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is really quick, this is I just started my third job of 2023 because of how crazy the market has been. So someone will look at my resume and say, this girl's a job hopper, and completely skip over me. And that probably has happened unknowingly. Which is why building those connections are so meaningful, because people that have actually gotten to know me, people that have worked with me, people that have interviewed me on podcasts, things like that, and keeping those relationships going, not just saying, okay, we chatted one time, then yeah, sometimes it happens like that where you never talk to the person again. But generally, if you go into every conversation with the mindset of how can I leave this better than I found it? How can I leave this person better than I found them? That's how we make the world better, one person at a time. So I think with that approach, I've built really great relationships to the point that, gaming people from 6 years ago still reach out to me because they think of me as the person, the recruiter when they're thinking of the recruitment space. And that to me is just such a blessing and an honor. Like, I'm blown away every time, and I'm like, this is so cool that people keep reaching out to me, and I just do my best to cultivate those relationships. And they just turn in. I have so many cool stories, but I'm gonna let you go.
Yeah, no, I mean, I could like do a whole series on you. I feel like, if you had to think of all those times, like, because I mean, I can't imagine, like, as a recruiter, like, you probably even get more rejection than a salesperson on a daily basis, because you're just reaching out to tons of candidates to try to bring them in. Half the time they're probably maybe in something that they are, they're happy with. They don't want to make a move, and you're trying to take someone away who's completely, like, it's a lot different. Like, selling a career or a job, it's a major life change. You're selling like a true connection and a calling, and kind of like a major shift in someone's life when you're selling a new position to somebody. So help me kind of, like, if I had to just kind of like a lens on some of those, like, little interactions you do to either keep up a relationship with maybe an organization that had rejected you, or maybe even a candidate that, like, it wasn't the right moment. Like, what are some of those moments? Like, what would those moments look like? Whether it's like LinkedIn messages or notes that you write, like, what do you think I would see in some of those, like, human interactions in those situations?
Yeah, I'm not afraid to reach out to people. I don't care what their title is. I mean, I care that they've worked for something and that they might be proud of that. But I'm personally not like, oh, they're a CEO, can't talk to them, they're too far above me. So I think that's the first mindset hurdle or hack or whatever you want to call it, is that, like, we're all people. And I laugh at this because it's so cliche, but, like, we all put our pants on pretty much the same way, right? There might be some variations there, but generally, like, we all are just human, waking up, doing our day-to-day things like everybody else. And so it's just taking that kind of an approach. I use voice memos a lot because I want people to hear my personality. I want them to hear my voice. I want them to hear my energy and my intention. I want them to know that, hey, if you're totally happy where you are, that is so cool, and I'm rooting for you, because everyone should be that happy at their job. And so I think it's the approach of, I'm not trying to flip them and turn them around. If they tell me they're really happy and they don't want to consider a new opportunity, I'm not like, well, have you considered? I mean, I don't really do a lot of pushback, because I might ask a question or two to dive a little bit deeper, and then have someone, answer that, if whatever they might say. Like, I know a guy recently said he was interested, then he wasn't, then he was, and, like, you could tell he was really conflicted. And I was like, it's cool. Like, you're happy where you are. That's awesome. That's why I'm reaching out, because I want to help people find alignment, and it is really a two-way street. So I think that whole approach, that first and foremost really helps me. From there, especially once I get in with someone, maybe they're like, yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more. Then I always send an email that lays out, like, here's my approach. Here's what I'm hoping for. I'm transparent. I'm looking for proactive communication. Like, you caught my eye. This opportunity maybe caught yours. So let's unpack that. And then, finally come as you are, however that might be. Show up as you, because from there, I can kind of read into that a little bit. I can ask my questions. Like, this one guy showed up totally defeated to a phone screen one time. You could just hear it in his voice. He was just deflated. And I called it out. And there's a sensitivity around it, right? Like, you have to kind of be careful. I don't want to offend anyone, but I sort of just say that. I'm like, hey, listen, I'm going to call something out here. If you don't want to go there, please tell me. But I did. I called it out. And we ended up unpacking why he was feeling that way. And I was like, all right, cool. So now that we've gotten that, like, kind of out of the way in a good way, let's restart this interview, okay? And he was like, all right, cool. And we started off on such a different foot when we sort of refreshed. And from there, I was able to get him into the interview process. And it doesn't have a super happy ending in terms of he didn't end up getting the job. But he got a chance, which is something that he wasn't getting. And that, in turn, gave him hope and totally turned around how he was looking at the situation. So I think just being really conscious of hearing what's going on the other end, and not just accepting the, hey, how are you today? Good? Oh yeah, how are you? Good? Awesome. Cool, let's move on. It's like dive a little bit deeper. And, those voice memos help me do that. Not only is it generally teaching someone a new feature of LinkedIn that they haven't even known about before, but again, it's making them feel some type of way. So it's that quote, right? It's not necessarily, you're not going to remember what someone said, but you're going to remember how they made you feel. And so my goal is to always make someone feel some type of way. And I think that really helps me with the longevity in my relationships, because people know that I really care. And because of that, I have people that, I met a woman this morning on LinkedIn. She was a referral to me, had never met me before. She's like, man, I really wish I would have met you a few weeks ago. I just accepted a new job. I said, no worries. Let's stay in touch. I'll check in and see how your job's going in a few weeks. And not for this role, but just to see, just to see how you're liking it, stuff like that. And because of just the few minutes I spent with her, she referred me to another friend that she thought would be a good fit for the position that I'm working on. And that happens all the time with this type of an approach, with a real human to human approach, right? I don't have an angle. I'm not trying to talk you into this job or make you take a pay cut or make you do something you don't want to do. I'm just there to listen and help you unpack things that maybe no one has ever asked you before.
Yeah, I mean, that's so huge. I think when you can call someone, if you can just pause, what recruiter, if you're listening to this, when was the last time you were interviewing for a job and you maybe felt a little nervous and you were kind of not as prepared, maybe you stumbled or whatever, and someone just stopped and paused and say, hey, I'm noticing maybe something's a little off here. I'm sensing this. If I'm wrong, you can tell me. If not, we can keep going. But if it's all right with you, can we just pause, unpack it, let's talk about it, and then we can address it and then kind of move forward? Is that cool? Asking for their permission. And you'd be like, oh my God, that person saw me. I can't even believe this. I thought I'm in this interview and it's truth or die. It's I need to perform or else. And those recruiters where nothing against, their approach. They're just kind of taking it I'm weeding out people in terms of, instead of like you said, really helping to understand the other person. And, there's a reason why the person caught your eye. I love that line where he was like, okay, there's something, about you that caught my eye, and maybe there's something that catches your eye about the job or something like that, because it's there's clearly something. But then when someone actually it's not just about your paper resume or your qualifications, it's about you, the person, and even just the moment that we're in, the person goes, okay, yeah, I'm going to remember Tab, and maybe I want to help Tab now. Even though I'm good, I want to help her because she was so unique in their approach. And that's selling by being human. That's sales without having, I love that. It's not oh, you don't want this job, well, have you considered this industry? Or this does make six figures. Or we all know those things we get in LinkedIn. Hey, I have a job you'd be perfect for. Here's a link to the job, let me know if you're interested. And I can find that anywhere. It's there's a dime a dozen. Why did you reach out to me, specifically? And not just, hey, I saw your profile, you'd be a perfect fit, let me know if you're interested. And no, this job specifically needs this, and you have this, and it looks like by the stuff you're putting out there, you care about this, or you believe this, or this is what you really love to do, and this is why the founders or whatever, this is exactly what they believe too. And if it's worth exploring, then great. But if not, no harm, no foul. And you just caught my eye because of these things right here. And
exactly. Yeah. When you put that out, you sort of call the elephant out. No matter what side of the table you're sitting on, you call that thing out proactively. And that's exactly my approach. I'm like, hey, you did catch my attention. This in your background stood out to me. And I'm not going to say, I probably used to say that someone would have been you'd be a perfect fit for this when I was newer in my career. I don't say that anymore. I say, hey, maybe this piques your interest too, the way that you've piqued mine, or something to that effect, because I don't know anything about you yet, other than what I maybe see on your resume, maybe what I see on your LinkedIn profile, which in some cases is not a lot, right? And so you really have to dive in, and I can't dive in with every single person right out there, but one thing that I started doing was in my disposition, whatever you call it, some people call it rejection email, whatever, when I'm sending out to a candidate hey, this probably isn't the most aligned at this time, if I can, I try to give them a reason why, so they understand that I'm not just haphazardly, rejecting your application or that something's wrong with you, but rather like, this is what my client's looking for. And right now that's just not aligned. But hey, that's cool because there's going to be more opportunities. And I'd love to stay connected on LinkedIn. And I, especially on places like Indeed, where technically it's like an anonymous rejection, so they don't know that it's coming from me. I want them to know there's a real human behind it looking at their resume. So I do include some of those details. I include my name. I include my LinkedIn profile. And it's crazy how little people will take advantage of that. But then those people that do, and because it's a two-way street too, I can't do everything, right? Like I do my best to put myself forward in a position to offer help to people, but they also have to take me up on it. And so I'm finding that some people are really starting to in those emails I've been sending out, and that's sort of a newer approach I'm taking, especially on the agency side. It's different a little bit on the corporate side, but where they can see, your name a bit easier. But yeah, it's all about putting, I think, the other person first. And like even in sales, and you might be making a sale, it's like you call out a hesitancy. There's a reason for that, because if I don't catch it now, then I'm going to get to an offer stage. I'm going to make you an offer and you're going to decline it. And I could have uncovered that probably a few calls back. Something in my gut was telling me, something in your voice was telling me, but I ignored it because not because I needed a commission or anything, but because it was just like, it's fine. You just, we've all been there in sales where we just kind of ignore some of those things. And the further along I've gotten in my career, I just stopped doing that. I'm like I never want to fit a square peg into a round hole type of situation. And so just calling those things out, sometimes you can get past that hurdle and sometimes you can't, but it's like the earlier that you can discover those things, the better for everyone.
Yeah. Man, I feel like you have so much knowledge in the area of like job searching, recruiting. If I had to ask you, like, if you could change something about, maybe it's one thing, maybe it's a couple things, what are the top things that come to mind when you think about how companies sell their job postings or job opportunities to candidates, and what are some things you might change about just the whole process in general, about how companies like attract talent into their organization and try to sell them on the job?
Yeah, I love this question because I just came from a global employer branding opportunity where I spent 4 months like literally just learning how to speak even more deeply to potential candidates. And then also right now what I'm doing, and what I've done before too, is rewrite job descriptions and turn them into job ads. So taking them from an internal document to more of a marketing collateral, external facing job ad that attracts and again repels the right people. And so I think where a lot of companies are just getting it wrong is they're just posting a job description filled with like a ton of keywords, and it's very one-sided. It's very like me. So it's taking that and turning it into like second person you language. It's making it all about the other person. Why are you going to be excited to come to work every day if you come work for us? What are you excited to bring to this experience with you from your past experiences? And really laying out that picture. And so the way that I do that, whether I'm on the agency or corporate side, is by having a qualifying call, basically like an intake call with a hiring manager, with a client, asking them a ton of questions about their business, about why they're even hiring for this role. Where do they see this role taking things within the company, and the impact that it will have, and all of those types of things. So I'm gathering all this information, and from there, then I'm turning it into a story. And I'm telling a little bit more. I'm recruiting for a client right now, and I start out by talking about the summit that they host and how many attendees have come, and kind of the who's who in the world that they exist in. And it starts by just telling the story, pulling someone in that's interested in events and meetings to give them a feel of like, imagine yourself in this setting and getting to expand on this. And so it's really painting that picture. And a lot of job descriptions just miss the mark because, again, it's just kind of one-sided. And sure, it might tell you like the salary or the benefits or whatever, but at the end of the day, you're like, this sounds like the job description I just read, and the one before that, and the one before that. And eventually you wonder why like unqualified candidates are applying, quote unquote, is because they're reading the same things over and over again, like their eyes are bleeding. They're just like, this is the same thing as, they're not, how can they all be the same? It's because organizations are afraid to tell their truth because they're afraid of losing candidates. Instead of having 2 really solid applicants, they want to have 500.
Yeah.
But it's like, you don't need that many. You don't. You just need someone that's aligned with your story who wants to be a part of it. So if you're like, you come work for us 90 hours a week and we're going to pay you a boatload of money, but you're going to work, tell that story because it's for someone. It's not for me. It's not, I'm a mom. I don't want to work 90 hours a week, not having a life outside of work, but it's for someone. So whatever your story is, you just need to tell it. And that's where organizations, I think, are falling really, really short.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true. Like, I feel like, you just, again, whether you're posting a job ad or you're talking to a recruiter or, talking to a candidate or you're selling something, it's like, how can I track the right people into what I need? Like, what does that right person look like? What would that right person be doing? What would they be saying? What would that right person be asking me? And why would that right person, even want what I have? And I just think it, like, when you look at it like those lens, like, it becomes less of a just like, these are the requirements. This is what is the bare minimum to come work here, or this is the bare minimum of, like, maybe what you're selling of, like, hey, this is the bare minimum of kind of what I think you might need, and this is what we have to. Okay, like, maybe you're starting that conversation of actually trying to, like, ask what that person, that individual person, like, really, really cares about, like, what would attract them, like, why are the reasons why people, buy what you have. And I love that about the process. I wish a lot. I think companies could learn a lot from what you just said.
I would love to rewrite, like, if someone's listening to this and they need help, just tell them to reach out to me. I would love to help people get better at this. It's really a shame because people are just, like, flying past each other without realizing whether or not they're actually a good fit because they're not getting specific enough. On both sides. I see that on both sides. The candidate side, too, when people are writing resumes. I'm seeing, sometimes I'll follow up with a question like, hey, I saw some things in your background, but this job really is a little bit more of this. Can you tell me a little bit more before we hop on a phone screen? Maybe just dive in. And they'll tell me all this stuff. I'm like, why wasn't that on your resume when you're applying for a job like this? So when you are applying, I mean, I know it can be annoying to tailor your resume, but if you're applying for an events opportunity and you have events background, but you didn't put any of that on your resume, well, then there's a mismatch. And I might fly right by you because you're not also putting the right things on your resume for me to recognize that you are actually the right fit for this opportunity. So it is really a two-way street. And that's where I think the cover letter comes in quite nicely, is not to regurgitate your resume, but to tell that story that maybe didn't feel, for whatever reason, like you didn't have enough space, or it didn't feel like you didn't have enough room, to explain the entirety of it. Like, that's where you take a cover letter and you use it to talk a little bit more about the thing that's going to help everyone connect those dots.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. And just, you could be succinct in a couple sentences, like say, hey, like, this is about my background. This is specifically in the job ad. You were looking for XYZ, or you believe XYZ, or this is, like, you think, people that, care about XYZ are the people you're looking for. This is what that looked like for me in my career. This is how I did those things in my past life, or how I do those things currently, and why I think it'd be great for us to have at least a conversation, because it's, we're aligned. How do we get aligned that way? So Tab, like, as we kind of come to the end of this thing, I mean, is there any kind of, like, I always like to, kind of look forward in the future, like, kind of a couple years from now. We talked about a couple years, like, prior to now, like, in a couple years, like, what do you hope, like, you're using these skills that you have building meaningful connections, like, what do you hope you're doing or using them in service of or support of? Do you ever think about that?
I mean, absolutely. At the end of the day, all I really care about is that connection, because no one should have to go through this life alone. And at the end of the day, that's what I want people to feel like when they come to me, is maybe they've never felt like they could trust a recruiter before, or maybe they've just felt lonely and like they didn't have someone in their corner who even saw them or believed in them. And so no matter what I'm doing, no matter where this life takes me, that's what I always want people to know and see in me, is that they can get that when they come to me. And yes, while I cannot possibly talk to every single human on the face of the planet, I do my best. Like every week, I'm very intentional about having conversations like this, whether it's on a podcast or whether it's just somebody random emailed me the other day that said they didn't even tell me who told them to reach out to me. They just said, hey, someone in my network told me to reach out to you and I'd love to chat. And that was pretty much all I got. And I was like, cool, let's set it up. I feel like if you're reaching out to me and putting yourself out there, then again, like I can't do it all the time, but every single week I make time intentionally to talk to people that I've never met before, that might not even be a good fit for any of the positions I'm currently working. But like everybody knows somebody. And I feel like as long as I'm always having impact, that's all I really care about, is just leave it better than I found it. And I know that that's like my living legacy, no matter what kind of position I'm in. So that's what excites me.
I love it, Tab. Well, that's a great way to end off. Tab, you've just been a pleasure. I'm so glad to keep knowing you after this many years. It's no wonder that I still do, because of how you show up and how you've left it better than you found it. Where can people continue to like reach out to you, find you, and get to know you a little bit more?
Yeah, LinkedIn is pretty much where I hang out. So you can search hashtag Tab the Recruiter or hashtag Strong Ass Mindset. Those are two of the hashtags I use a lot. Come to my page, check out my content. I'm generally posting about a variety of things, from your career search to recruiters leveling up, to my faith, to things about cancer and health. So I'm a little bit all over the place, which if you get to know me, you'll know is I'm just sort of a tangent type of person sometimes. But at the end of the day, I'm just trying to reach the right people at the right time with the right kind of message that's put on my heart. So you're stuck with me now, obviously, Alex. So too bad. You should never have answered me that one day.
I'm all good for it. Can't wait for the next time we get to hang out in person, and big hugs all around. Tab the Recruiter, Tabitha Kavanaugh. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for reaching out and for jumping on the podcast today.
Thank you, Alex. It's always a pleasure. Appreciate you.
All right, you too.